Welcome to Adult ypww Lesson 6. I do not own the rights to this music. Today's topic is The Widow of Zarephath, Faith in Scarcity. The lesson text is coming out of 1 Kings chapter 17, verses 8 through 16. The memory verse. I will read the King James Version first, and then the New Living Translation of 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 9. And the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, Arise, get thee to Zarephath, which belongeth to Zidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain thee. The New Living Translation of 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 9. Then the Lord said to Elijah, Go and live in the village of Zarephath, near the city of Sidon. I have instructed a widow there to feed you. The introduction. The story of the widow of Zarephath unfolds during a season marked by drought, famine, and divine judgment. The land is dry, resources are depleted, and survival has become uncertain for everyone. This is not a time of abundance or optimism, but a moment when hope itself feels scarce. It is within this harsh reality that God speaks to the prophet Elijah and sends him to an unexpected source of provision, a widow living in a foreign city. This instruction immediately challenges our assumptions about how God works. God does not send Elijah to a wealthy household, a royal court, or a well-stocked granary. Instead, he directs him to a woman who has almost nothing. The widow of Zarephath is not introduced as a woman of means, but as someone standing at the edge of despair. She has one last meal planned for herself and her son, and then she expects death to follow. From every human perspective, she is the one in need of help, not the one positioned to help anyone else. Yet God sees her differently. In His economy, scarcity does not disqualify someone from purpose. In fact, scarcity often becomes the setting in which faith is revealed most clearly. This lesson invites us to explore how faith operates when resources are limited. Fear is loud and obedience seems unreasonable. Through the widow's story, we discover that God does not wait for abundance before He acts. He responds to trust even when all we have is a little. The discussion. When God tells Elijah that He has commanded a widow to sustain him, the statement is striking. Nothing in the text suggests that the widow has been informed of this assignment. From her perspective, she is simply trying to survive. This tension reveals an important truth. God may be working in our lives long before we understand what He is doing. Divine purpose often unfolds quietly, without explanation until faith is required. As Elijah approaches the city gate, he encourages the widow gathering sticks, an ordinary task with extraordinary meaning. She is preparing for her final act of provision. When Elijah asks her for water, she complies without protest. Water, though scarce, is still accessible. When he asks for bread, the reality of her situation comes fully into view. She responds with honesty, explaining that she has only a handful of meal and a little oil left. Her plan is not for survival, but for closure. Elijah's response introduces a word from the Lord that directly confronts her fear. Fear not. This command is followed by instruction that seems impossible. He tells her to prepare a small cake for him first, with the promise that God will sustain what remains. The widow is asked to give before she receives, to trust before she sees, and to obey before there is any visible change in her circumstances. This moment represents a crossroads of faith. If she refuses, her future remains exactly as she expects, loss and death. If she obeys, she risks accelerating that outcome. Faith here is not emotional confidence. It is courageous obedience. When the widow acts on the word spoken to her, she aligns herself with God's promise rather than her fear. Scripture tells us that the meal did not waste and the oil did not fail. Not once, but day after day. God did not overwhelm her with abundance. He sustained her with sufficiency. His daily provision required ongoing trust. Each day, she had to believe that tomorrow's meal would still be there. In this way, God transformed her scarcity into a relationship of dependence. The application. The widow of Zarephath teaches us that faith is often revealed in moments of limitation. Many believers assume that faith operates best when resources are plentiful and circumstances are favorable. This story challenges that assumption. Faith does not begin when we have excess, it begins when we are willing to trust God for what little we have. Like the widow, many people today live with the mindset shaped by fear of lack. We ration hope, conserve generosity, and guard obedience because we are afraid of running out. Fear says, if I give, I will not have enough. Faith responds, if I trust God, what I have will be sustained. The widow's obedience did not remove scarcity from her life, but it removed fear's control over her decisions. This lesson also challenges the belief that obedience should feel safe. The widow was not asked to give from her surplus, but from her survival. Her faith was costly, visible, and deliberate. In the same way, God may ask believers to trust Him with limited finances, limited energy, limited time, or limited understanding. Faith is not proven by comfort, but by surrender. From a Pentecostal life perspective, this story reminds us that obedience often precedes manifestation. The miracle followed the act, not the other way around. God did not multiply the meal and oil first. He multiplied them after the widow acted in faith. This principle still applies today. When we place our little in God's hands, He releases provision according to His purpose. The widow's experience also reframes our understanding of provision. God did not give her everything at once. He gave her enough for each day. This teaches us to trust God daily rather than demand immediate abundance. Dependence on God is not weakness, it is the posture that invites divine faithfulness. The conclusion. The widow of Zarephath stands as a powerful witness to faith in scarcity. She was not influential, wealthy, or secure, yet her obedience became the means through which God sustained a prophet and preserved her household. Her story reminds us that God's greatest miracles are often hidden within simple acts of trust. This lesson assures us that God is not intimidated by our lack. He is not waiting for us to accumulate more before He moves. He responds to faith that is willing to act even when resources are limited and outcomes are uncertain. Scarcity does not disqualify us from God's purposes. It often positions us to experience His provision more deeply. When the widow placed her little in God's hands, she discovered that His supply was greater than her fear. Day after day, God proved Himself faithful. Her story encourages believers to trust God not just for abundance, but for daily bread. In doing so, we learn that faith in scarcity is not about how much we have, it is about who we trust. The questions for today's lesson. Number 1, why do you think God chose a widow in a foreign land to sustain Elijah during the famine? Number 2, what fears did the widow express and how do they reflect fears people face today? Number 3, how does this story challenge the idea that faith requires abundance or security? Number 4, what little might God be asking you to place in His hands right now? And number 5, what does daily provision teach us about trust, patience, and dependence on God? The end. God bless you and thank you for joining me today.